So it's really interesting to me how many of the sessions yesterday have kind of led into what I'm going to talk about today. From Julia's talk to Allie's talk to the woman-owned business talk, a lot of it was dealing with uncomfortable situations, how we deal with things that may make us anxious. And I want to start out by saying that what I'm going to talk about today isn't any better or worse than what they were talking about yesterday. We all have stuff. My stuff isn't any better or worse than your stuff. This isn't a contest to see who's had the worst life and able to achieve the most success. Because I know that we've all dealt with stuff over the years. And a lot of that is what we filter through when we're in conferences like this, when we meet other business professionals. We talk about the success of our business, the success of our children, things that are good. But today I'm going to get unfiltered. I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship unfiltered. And the tagline for my talk this morning is how to take care of yourself so you can take care of your team and your customers. And I'm super proud because I'm actually a published author with that one sentence in a book that Facebook published that Sheryl Sandberg wrote the introduction for. So there's a book out there with my face and that one line, probably the only time I'll be published. See, now I'm doing that negative self-talk, so all right, let's get out of that. So as I said, we all have stories. You know, we tell the fun stories when we're with new acquaintances. Sometimes we tell the not so fun stories when we're hanging out with our best friends or our family members. And from the outside looking in, my story is pretty fun. And I got to borrow from Chad yesterday and talk about how I got here. How did I get here, in the words of the talking heads? So many people have asked me, did you always want to own a comic shop? And the answer is no. You know, I've always loved comics, but I didn't think that I could make a living owning a comic shop. And really being brought up in a family and in a society that encourages high school, college, get a real job, comic shop was not in the cards. But when I look back, my first job was a paper route at age 11. My second job, while doing the paper route, was bagging groceries at age 14. My first job with a college degree was waiting tables at a steakhouse. I've worked for Sam Goody Musicland. I've done sales and marketing for several different companies. So they've all been customer service related and sales related. And that absolutely feeds into what I'm doing today. And I started Alter Ego Comics as an e-commerce business out of my home. And that's a picture up there of my kids when they were like 2 and 4. They're now 21 and 19, and that was our garage when we came back from a trip of deliveries that had been dropped off. Thankfully, they were still there. It didn't walk away. So another plug for Lima, your stuff won't get stolen in your driveway most of the time. So I started Alter Ego Comics out of our house as an e-commerce business in 2003. 2 years later, I opened the brick and mortar store that some of you got to visit a couple of days ago. And if you haven't been there, consider this an open invitation to come see us in downtown Lima. And I didn't look back. You know, that was it. So opened the store in 2005. There's the ribbon cutting. We just did another ribbon cutting, by the way, for Jessica's new location, which is in the building that I own. So that Jessica's my tenant. That's kind of awesome. Maybe that's why she asked me to speak. Is that why she asked me to speak? So we did the ribbon cutting in 2005. And then we bought this building in 2009, which is where the store is now, home to several small businesses. Then in 2013, 10 years after I started my e-commerce business, we were named Small Business of the Year by the Lima-Allen County Chamber of Commerce. In 2019, as you heard, I co-founded a group called Legacy Arts, which is a group of small business owners that work together to foster the growth of entrepreneurship and artists in our community. We started out with 4 businesses, and now we have 6, and now Marketing Group is part of that group, so super excited to be part of that. And this year, Angie and I invested $250,000 in the renovation of our building. So on the outside looking in, again, everything was looking pretty awesome, but the unfiltered version of my life was significantly different. So this is 2016. Angie and I are celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary in Cancun, Mexico. And the trip started out okay. At one point during the trip, and for the first time in my life, I felt an urge to jump over that balcony. I actually heard a voice in my head that said, jump. And I had no idea where it came from. I had never had any thoughts like that before. In addition to that, I started to develop a pain in my left leg that was so bad that we called the resort doctor, who was younger than Doogie Howser. And we tried to get through that, but my focus on the pain in my leg and the thought of being stranded in Mexico, I had a crazy active brain and I didn't know why, and we'll find out in just a little bit here. But all I could think of was, I'm never going to see my kids again. I'm going to be stuck in a Mexican hospital. Nothing against Mexican hospitals. And it was so bad that we cut our trip short and came home early. Well, we found out eventually that I had a physical ailment in my leg called erythromyalgia, which affects 1 in 100,000 people. And it causes burning, pain, discomfort. It's brought on by stress, alcohol, heat, Cancun. That's probably why that happened. But it took 3 months to get that diagnosis. 3 months back in Lima, worrying every day. 3 months of sleeping 2 hours a night, of getting MRIs and CT scans and blood work. There was a physical problem. My doctors could see it, but they couldn't figure out what it was. So eventually we got that diagnosis. And in addition to getting that diagnosis, I realized that I needed help for my mind, not just my body. I'd been talking to my wife, and she has told me since that those 3 months were the scariest months of her life, of me being just broken, inside and out. So for the first time, I decided I need to see a therapist. So my therapist illustrated my situation, which turned out to be general anxiety, depression, with a touch of OCD thrown in for good measure. Well, my life was like a 2-liter bottle, and every time I experienced an anxious moment, you shake that bottle up. I would be shaken up. You do that enough times, and the cap blows off, and that's what happened in Cancun. My cap blew off, I had a nervous breakdown, and it put me on the path to living with anxiety. I take medication every day, and I practice some other things which we're going to get to in a minute, and that's really the purpose of this presentation, is to talk about the things that have worked for me that I hope will work for you if you struggle with anxiety or if you just want to be a better leader there for your team and your customers. So when I was talking to my therapist, my brain fog, which had kind of suppressed all these anxious moments during my life, lifted, and I realized that I had basically been afraid for most of my life. I was afraid of everything. Most of it revolved around death. But I was afraid to be the last one to fall asleep in my house when I was a kid. I wanted to be asleep before everyone else, because then if I heard noises, I was awake and stuck having to live with it. I was afraid of disappointing my parents, like many of us are when you're in your younger years, in your teens. And believe it or not, I was even afraid of being abducted by aliens. I kid you not. Growing up in the 80s, that was actually a thought that I had. It was like, I'm going to be abducted by aliens. So clearly there was something wrong with me, and I should have been diagnosed many, many years ago. So even as an adult, my anxious brain looked like this, and I'll give you a couple of examples. So this was 5 years ago. At the time, our youngest was 7 years old. And I would have a recurring thought every day towards the end of school that Kevin would take the bus home, would get off, try to get into the house would be locked, and he would walk across the street to my father-in-law's house, he actually lives across the street from us, and get hit by a car. It was with me all the time. 3 o'clock, nearly every day, I hope Kevin's all right. And this was a waking thought, not a dream. Speaking of dreams, I didn't dream. Angie would tell me nearly every morning, I had the weirdest dream, or I got to tell you about this dream, and I didn't dream. My brain wasn't getting to the point where I could have enough REM sleep to dream. And I would wake up nearly every morning with a song in my head. I thought this was normal until I brought it up to her one time, and she's like, nope, that doesn't happen to me. Today's was Dancing in the Streets, by the way, not the good version, the Mick Jagger, David Bowie version. So even with medication, that is still like And it's like you hear the lyrics, you hear it over and over in your head. And the trick is not to fight it. The trick is to just think music, or listening. So it turns out that roughly 40 years of anxiety can deplete the amount of serotonin in someone's brain. And that's pretty much what happened to me. So the medication was to help with the serotonin, was to kind of keep me from having that racing brain. And it worked. But there were 4 specific moments that brought me to that point in Cancun. This is my family. Angie and I have 3 kids. Connor's 21, Ethan's 19, Kevin is 12. When the 2 oldest were about 2 and 4, we started getting questions about, when are you going to have more kids? And I know I've got people in the audience who choose not to have kids, and I know you guys get those questions like, when are you going to have kids? Well, for us, when we eventually did have Kevin, and he's 10 years younger than my oldest, and 8 years younger than my next kid, we would get comments like, so he was an oops, right? Well, he wasn't. Angie had 3 consecutive miscarriages between Ethan and Kevin. And I didn't know how to deal with it. My job was to make sure she was okay. But I didn't make sure I was okay. In 2012, we took a family vacation to West Virginia. 24 hours after this picture was taken, we got a phone call that my mother-in-law was in the hospital and not expected to live. She'd been battling breast cancer for 20 years, and this was her 3rd round with it. So, again, what do? I get in the driver's seat, and I get us home as fast as we can. I have to get my wife home to say goodbye to her mom before she dies. Along the way, we get a phone call from my father-in-law. He wanted the kids to say goodbye to Grandma. So we're passing a cell phone through our minivan so that my 13-year-old, my 11-year-old, and my 3-year-old could say goodbye to their grandma. And she couldn't say anything because she was intubated. We got home in time for Angie to say goodbye to her mom in the middle of the night, and my kids had to live without their grandma, who they saw every day at school. She was the cafeteria manager at their school and an extremely well-loved woman. And all I could think about was, are my kids okay? Is my wife okay? And I didn't, again, make sure that I was okay. 2015 was the tipping point. My parents moved from Detroit to Lima to be closer to us in 2013, and they were both in their 70s. My mom had recently been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and within 2 years, they were both in a nursing home. When they moved here, my mom was still able to drive. 3 years later, she was confined to a wheelchair. Turns out she was misdiagnosed. She didn't have Parkinson's, she had something called progressive supranuclear palsy, which is much more fast-acting than Parkinson's. Takes away your mobility, takes away your muscles, and when she eventually lost the ability to swallow and chose not to live with a feeding tube, that was it. So my mom passed in 2018, and my dad passed away 15 months later. And the last sad story I'll tell, before we get to maybe some ways well, at least ways that have helped me. And I realize this is a lousy way to start day 2 of talking about all this sadness, but I think there is a silver lining to it. So I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and my kids, by osmosis, also became huge Star Wars fans. So we were so excited to see the first Star Wars movie in 10 years with The Force Awakens that opened on December 17th, 2015. 12 hours later, I got a phone call from my father-in-law. My brother-in-law had dropped dead of a heart attack in his front yard. He was 40 years old. I asked what I could do. He asked me to go tell Angie that her brother was dead. So I told my staff what I needed to do. I got in my car and I drove the 5 miles to the school where she was teaching. It was the longest drive of my life. And afterwards, in the days and weeks and months that followed, every time I drove down that road, I would feel what I felt on that original drive. Angie's brother Doug was a daily part of our kids' lives again. He coached them in football and baseball. He was the life of the party. He was at Sunday dinners all the time. And all I could think about again was how something had been taken away from my children. And I had to comfort them, and I had to comfort my wife, but I didn't comfort myself. So that's how I got to that fateful place in Cancun in March of 2016. Decades of anxiety combined with several life-altering changes in rapid succession pushed me over the edge, almost literally. But now I was diagnosed with anxiety with a touch of OCD thrown in for good measure. And I stumbled across a book called The Miracle Morning, The 6 Habits That Will Change Your Life Before 8 a.m. by a guy named Hal Elrod. Has anybody read the book? Wow, this is good. The book changed my life. And Hal wrote the book as he was recovering from being hit by a drunk driver head-on at 70 miles an hour when he was 20 years old. Was told he would never walk again. He ended up running an ultra-marathon, having kids, getting married, living. He's still alive with us today. He's battled cancer since then. But he was really a super high achiever, and he wanted to see what other high achievers had in common. And some of these things, we've heard before. So he researched all kinds of high achievers and leaders, and he found that nearly all of them got up early in the morning. Some exercised, some read books, some meditated, others practiced affirmations, writing, and visualization. But Hal asked the question, what if someone did all of these things? And that sounded pretty good to me, because I had tried bits and pieces of those things over the years, but it wasn't making any significant difference in my mental health. So Hal came up with the Savers program, the Life Savers. S stands for silence, and silence can be whatever you want it to be. For me, it's meditation, but for you, it could be prayer. It could be sitting out on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to nature. Meditation for me has been a game changer, mindfulness meditation. And the book that kind of turned me on to that was Meditation by Fidgety Skeptics by a guy named Dan Harris, who's the Good Morning America weekend news anchor. Famously had a panic attack on live television many years ago. If you search for Dan Harris on YouTube, you'll find it. And I'm a fidgety skeptic, so the book was for me. So I love the book, and I downloaded the app, 10% Happier, and that's what I use every day. I meditate for 10 minutes in the morning. There have been times when I meditate 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, just depends on the type of day I'm having. But 10 minutes is enough for me. Mindfulness has been scientifically proven to reduce stress, lower blood pressure, reduce chronic pain, improve sleep. Sounds like a miracle cure. But the science is behind it. And it's something you need to practice. It's a practice. Many people call it a bicep curl for your brain. You don't meditate once and get it. And if you meditate and you think you're supposed to clear your mind, that's not it either. So it takes some practice. I highly recommend it. The A is for affirmations. I don't know about you, but this is what I thought about when I hear the word affirmations. Stuart Smalley's, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. But it turns out that there's science behind affirmations as well. They motivate you to act. They help you concentrate on your goals. They influence your subconscious and access new beliefs. They help you feel positive about yourself and boost your self-confidence, and they change your negative thought patterns into positive ones. Jim Carrey, Denzel Washington, Oprah Winfrey, these are just a few people that have practiced affirmations in their lives, and I think they've achieved a fair amount of success. One of the best books that I've read this year is Soundtracks by Jon Acuff. Anybody read it? A handful. Someone enough that he's clapping. That's good. Highly recommend it. Jon Acuff is a very funny, very talented personal development guy. And he included an affirmation in his book. Soundtracks is all about changing the negative soundtracks in our minds to positive soundtracks. And the affirmation that he includes in the book is one that I've adopted and have been practicing for several months. I've used different ones over the years. Zig Ziglar had one, back in the day This one is the one that has stuck with me the most, and I'll share that with you today. You stand in front of a mirror in the morning and the evening. I just do the morning because I don't want anybody to see me. I stand in front of the mirror and I say, I, Marc Bowker, choose my thoughts. I know that doing my best starts with thinking my best. Like laying a path for an adventure, these thoughts set the course for my actions. I'm confident that what I think matters. I'm excited to see what happens next. I'm disciplined and dedicated to stick with it. Here are 10 things I know. Number 1, today is brand new and tomorrow is too. Number 2, I've got a gift worth giving. Number 3, the only person standing in my way is me, and I quit doing that yesterday. Number 4, I am the CEO of me, and I am the best boss. Number 5, winning is contagious. When I help others win, I win too. Number 6, feeling uncomfortable is just a sign that my old comfort zone is having a hard time keeping up with me. Number 7, momentum is messy. Number 8, everything is always working out for me. And that's a tough one. I say that one a lot to remind myself that I am very fortunate with what I have in my life. Number 9, I am my biggest fan. And number 10, the best response to obstacles is to do it anyway. I've pulled the slingshot back. I'm not leaving this room, I'm launching from it, ready for a day of untold opportunities. I've packed honesty, generosity, laughter, and bravery for the road ahead. Watch out, world. It's time to step up, step out, and step in. And I do that every day. And it helps. I've seen a difference. I have better days when I recite an affirmation like this in the morning. The V in SAVOR stands for visualization. And I've got to tell you, this is the one I struggle with the most. But maybe Jen should be the one to be talking about this because we learned yesterday that it's her primary coping mechanism. So as she said, you're supposed to kind of picture your day ahead. Imagine everything going the way that you want it to go. Whether you have client meetings, activities with your kids, dinner with your spouse, visualize how that day is going to go. E is for exercise, and everybody can do this. It doesn't have to be CrossFit or marathon running. For me, it's walking, usually just 30 minutes a day. Studies have shown that just 30 minutes of moderate exercise can be as effective in reducing stress and anxiety as medication. It improves your memory, it helps you sleep better. There's no reason not to just walk 30 minutes a day, unless you have a bum knee like my wife. And then you need to swim or do aqua aerobics, something like that. R is for reading. And I'm assuming because you're here, because you're a leader, you probably read. You've probably heard the Harry Truman quote, all leaders are readers, but not all readers are leaders. No, wait a minute, how's that go? Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. Thank you, Harry Truman. And I believe it. You don't know what you don't know, and that's why we're here, learning things about social media marketing, learning things about being a better person, about being a healthier person, about being a leader. My morning routine starts with 30 minutes of reading every day, usually nonfiction, business, personal development, or biographies. Your mileage may vary. Without reading, I would not have discovered most of the savors. S is for scribing. Yes, Hal Elrod was looking for a letter to use at the end of savors and couldn't fit writing in there, so he came up with scribing. I found journaling to be extremely helpful to me, and I did it digitally. I used a website to journal after I got my anxiety diagnosis. And today, usually my writing takes the form of a Facebook post. As social media people, we need to be able to, you can use video, absolutely. You can use audio, absolutely. But you can also do an Instagram post or a Facebook post or a tweet or whatever, and that's a way to get your writing in. Oddly enough, when I first went to see my therapist, and she was kind of walking me through the non-medication part of my diagnosis and treatment, she recommended 3 of these 6 things to me, and I had already started them. So silence, affirmation, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. That's what my morning routine looks like. I wake up at 6:15, I read for 30 minutes, I exercise for 30 minutes, I eat, shower, meditate, affirmations, out the door. So in 2 hours in the morning, and that's very essential to my well-being. Angie knows it, my kids know it, and I've made some poor choices because of it. I've passed on things that I should have done with my kids because I felt I had to get my morning routine in. So is it okay to deviate from that? Absolutely. I try to follow James Clear's recommendation from Atomic Habits not to miss 2 days in a row. And that's what's working. That's what's working for me in keeping a work-life balance. I know yesterday we talked about, there is no work-life balance, there's just harmony. Call it balance, call whatever you want. But that's what works. And if you need to split it up into 2 parts of the day, do some in the morning, do some in the evening, do it throughout the day. Start with 10 minutes. Start with 10 minutes of each. Spend an hour taking care of yourself so that you can take care of your team and your customers. So last month, Angie and I celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. And we went to Colorado. It was beautiful. It was amazing. I would totally go back. I even got to meditate at Red Rocks, which was phenomenal. And it was quiet enough, like no one bothered me. I thought that people would be talking a lot as they were going by, and it was very, very cool. And I'd be lying that the last years were stress-free, anxiety-free. But I'm so much better, in a better place now than I was 5 years ago, because I asked for help. Because I realized that in addition to take care of the people that I love around me, in addition to taking care of my team and my customers, I had to take care of myself. It is okay to ask for help. It is okay to take medication. There's a big stigma behind that. But it helps. And it's okay not to be okay. Life is never perfect. It's rarely easy, but it can be balanced. Practicing the savers have helped me live with anxiety. And if they help just one of you, then sharing my unfiltered life will have been worth it. Thank you.